As Liam mentioned, my name is Chris Graves, and I'm the Director of Strategic Accounts here at CUNA Mutual Group. I hope you've had a great year so far, and you're enjoying the beginning of the holiday season. And around this time of year, many of us start to think about doing better and also about being better. And that's very fitting with today's topic of delivering a better plan experience. First, I'd like to thank our partners at RPAG for hosting this event and including us in this incredible webinar series. We greatly appreciate not only today's opportunity, but also the overall partnership and the chance to deliver tools and ideas to RPAG members throughout the country like yourselves. Before I get to Randy, I just want to remind you of some basic information on CUNA Mutual Group. We're a mission-based financial services company that is here to help hardworking Americans achieve financial security. And here in Total Retirement Solutions, we're a small market record keeper providing services to plans at or under $25 million in assets. Now, we offer both unbundled and bundled administration models with a significant focus on working with local TPAs for just over 7 years now. We support not only 401ks, but also ERISA 403bs, non-qualified plans, and also a brand new unbundled cash balance product that we just launched. Now, we have tremendous confidence in our programs and our platform and the services we offer, but we'd rather differentiate ourselves from other firms by offering value well beyond product solutions. And that's where Randy and our Retirement Consultant Institute come into play. Now, Randy Fuss is our resident practice management coach. He's also the chief creator of all the content in our Retirement Consultant Institute. He presents this information in a lot of different settings, but probably most importantly, he trains our sales team to be able to deliver this content effectively to their local clients like you on the call. Randy is a registered corporate coach and also a former financial advisor, which allows him to really bring a genuine perspective to the material. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Randy right now. So Randy, take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris, and welcome everybody. As Chris mentioned, I run what's called the Retirement Consultant Institute, which is really a whole host of tools and resources that are dedicated to those advisors that are working the qualified plan space. And really what the main objective is to help you get more wins in terms of new plan business, but also to make sure we increase your retention as much as possible. It's really fascinating how time flies so quickly, because just 2 months ago, I was at the RPAG conference in Southern California and had the pleasure of speaking at what's called the Innovation Lab. I hope a few of you were there. Unfortunately, we only had 10 minutes. So you're going to see a couple of slides that were the opening for what was delivered in September, but we're going to take that a lot further today. And to get us started, though, I wanted to really focus on the word better. And I want you to think of better in the context of sports, right? If you think about any champion, whether or not it's a team sport or an individual, when they win the big trophy, the big championship, they always get the question of saying, are you willing to repeat? Are you going to repeat? And invariably, the answer is going to be, well, yes, we're going to strive to, but we're going to have to improve. We're going to have to, quote unquote, get better. It doesn't matter if it's a Super Bowl. It doesn't matter if it's a tennis match. Now, interestingly enough, in the sports world, there are a couple of perfects, right? In baseball, you can pitch a perfect game. There's been a whopping 15 of them since the turn of the last century in 1900. You can actually bowl a perfect game, a perfect 300. And lo and behold, in women's gymnastics, way back in 1976, Nadia Comaneci put down a couple routines that got a quote unquote perfect 10. And they've changed the rules ever since. But for everybody else, there's only better. Now, when it comes to your retirement plan practice, especially when we're working with the folks at RPAG, you are very experienced, knowledgeable retirement plan professionals. And I'm quite certain that you feel very good about your offering in terms of the support that you give to your plan clients. So it does beg the question of what is better going to look like for you? Do you feel like you've achieved perfection? Or is there another gear? Is there another bar a little bit higher than you are today? And hopefully you are here today because you do want to focus on what are some things you can do to deliver a better plan experience. Now, I've seen one particular survey 2 years in a row, and both times I fell out of my chair when I read them. And this is the Plan Sponsor Attitude Survey that Fidelity publishes. It comes out about mid-year every year. And I was quite astounded last year when I found out that 47% of plan sponsors were actively looking to replace their advisor, almost half. And roughly 2/3, 66%, It said that they had their interest picked by a recent advisor solicitation. Now, we know the majority of the time who the decision makers are. It's some combination of the HR professional, the CFO, and the CEO, but they continue to get solicited over once a quarter. Now, I was waiting tooth and nail for the survey this year, and I've got a contact at Fidelity that was badgering by spring. And finally, in the summer, I did get the most recent report. And lo and behold, the number of sponsors that are actively looking to replace their advisor got cut in half. I said, well, that's good news. I guess maybe they're happy with who they have in place. Unfortunately, over a third did get replaced. According to their survey, 37% of sponsors changed their advisors in the last 12 months. Now, I know that maybe that's not a universal number across the entire industry, but certainly this is one of the biggest sponsor reports that's out there. And we know too that sometimes they might replace the advisor and not the actual record keeper. There's lots of reasons why they're disjointed, but quite often we're sort of joined at the hip. And they continue to have their interest picked by advisor solicitations. And they continue to getting solicited at a pretty alarming rate. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, and I certainly don't want to suggest that a big portion of your plans are going to get up and leave, or hopefully cross my fingers that a third of your plans have not already left. But it really kind of does beg the question, a twofold question of what is your offense and what is your defense? Now, from a defense standpoint, I had mentioned the word retention, and certainly from a defensive posture, are you willing to be proactive, right? Are you going to stay just reactive and might lose a plan or two? Or are you willing to get out in front of this and saying, hey, what do I need to do to really make sure that my retention, stays above industry average? From an offensive standpoint, in terms of winning new business, certainly the stats beg these last 2 years that there are still plans in motion. So with that as a backdrop, there's a couple of things I want to make sure that we cover. And one is, well, why the heck are they even, what are they interested in that they're not getting right now? Why are they leaving? And it's kind of interesting because you look through the pages of the survey and it comes to the point where there's about 20 different answers. There's really not one massive bar graph that goes way higher than everybody else that says they're leaving because of X. It's not necessarily just because of cost. It's not necessarily just because of service. There's a whole bunch of things that are all clumped right around that 30% mark. But here's kind of a list of some of the things. And to do this, I really want to not necessarily think of the plan sponsor as one entity. It's not one decision-making unit. Sometimes it appears that way, but you actually have a couple of individuals, specifically the HR professional, the CEO and the CFO, that might have very, very different needs in terms of the plan. You have the HR professional that's probably most focused on make sure that my participants are taken care of and supported, and make sure that I'm supported in terms of running the plan. You have the CEO, they're a little bit of a wild card in terms of what they're looking for out of the plan, but a CEO is going to primarily tell you that I'm focused on productivity and growth. I just want to make sure that this plan kind of fits into that productivity and make sure it's not a disruption in any way, shape, or form. Now, the CFO, they're kind of the money person, right? So they're all going to be about fees, funds, and fiduciary. And then there's you. And from your standpoint, it's pretty simple. If they're happy, I'm happy. And if you could look at this list of things that there's sort of the wish list of each of these parties, I'm certain that you can just kind of take the checklist out and say, yeah, I'm delivering all these things. Therefore, we're good for the long haul. But what does better look like then if you're checking all the boxes? Well, I wanted to share with you that I live in Sonoma County. It's beautiful wine country up in Northern California, hour due north of San Francisco. And recently, my wife and we went to a deli. This is in wine country. They serve some very good wine, and we had the perfect charcuterie board. I don't think either of us had ever experienced anything quite like this before. It was absolutely perfect. You could not do any better than this. And I think from our own perspective, it was like, we're going to keep coming back and having this over and over again. But then something happened. They came up to us and they asked us, the waiter, and said, do you want to try this? Well, what is this? It was chocolate dipped bacon on a stick. Folks, I got to tell you that that was better, right? And what's interesting is that was just sitting in a jar up on the deli counter, right? But the point being is that we were perfectly content with what we had. We would be continue to come there for an entire year, year in and year out. And yet they brought something to us proactively that even enhanced that experience. Now think about that as you're thinking, now that you're all focused on chocolate dipped bacon. So what does better look like when what you have offered is already really good, right? And what I want to bring into this right now is the experience of our RMs, our relationship managers, who are working with our existing plans day to day, and they're asking that very question: what does better look like for you? Now, if you were to ask that question, maybe some of them won't even be able to articulate what it is that they're looking for. But again, a lot of them have had their interest picked in some way, shape, or form. So, what are those things? Well, from the HR perspective, they're probably going to tell you, and this is what we hear more often, is that, yeah, our participants are being supported, but we need to increase that engagement to a much, much higher level than we have currently. Now, the CEO is a little bit different animal, right? They're concerned about productivity and growth. And by far, their number one concern is retention, and specifically the C-suite, specifically the highly compensated individuals. They might have checked all the boxes in the past about fees, funds, fiduciary, but more and more they're telling us, I do not want cookie cutter anymore. I don't want plan in a box. I don't want preset menus for either fees or for funds. I want to have the flexibility to really customize exactly what's going to be best for our plan. Now, and then there's you who's simply saying, well, in order for me to deliver all these additional things that are on your wish list, I've got to get some support, right? Because I want to retain your business. I want to grow my business, but I'm not necessarily in a position to deliver all these things today, right? So specifically, we have participant engagement, talent retention, and flexibility. And lo and behold, this is going to be a big part of what we're going to discuss today. Now, sometimes it's a wish list, right? Sometimes like, well, really pie in the sky, if we could have something a little better, it would be X. Sometimes it could be called what is an elevator rant, which means they're on a rampage about it. Now, I'm certain that if they were an elevator rant, you would have already heard about it. But in certain respects, this is where we're heading in terms of things that are on their wish list, right? So that being said, it's going to be three main topics we're going to discover. The one is how and what it looks like to have the resources to increase the participant engagement. We'll show you just to spitball a couple of things there. Secondly, we're going to share with you some solutions for improving the executive retention. And last but certainly not least, what do the next steps look like in achieving a better fiduciary process? Again, one that emphasizes that flexibility that the CFO is looking for. So again, top to bottom, HR, CEO, CFO, and I got to warn you ahead of time, there's lots and lots of overlap, right? Despite the fact that they're in different roles and have different needs, there's quite a bit of overlap. But with that said, let's go ahead and start with the first party, which is how do we increase that participant education? Now, to get us started on this, I wanted to share with you that, as I mentioned, I live about an hour north of San Francisco. And my wife and I go down to the city about once a year for a quote unquote night in the city. You know, it could be a play, it could be a concert, it could be a baseball game. We've done it every year for God knows how many years. And the last time we were down there was in April. And this was to see a Dodger Giant game. And we have our favorite hotel, and that hotel happens to be in the shadow of Salesforce headquarters and LinkedIn headquarters. They're literally these massive high rises that the shadow are on this Marriott property that we stay at. And every year we have this favorite little tiki bar that we tend to go get happy hour before we go off to our event. In this case, it was a baseball game in April. Lo and behold, at 5 o'clock on a weeknight, we were the only ones in the bar. There was not a single soul in there. It was the same thing last year. It was the same thing the year before. And this particular time, we really, really had thought that, you know, we're clearly out of COVID. You know, people are coming back to the office. but such is not the case, right? If you look at pre-COVID, 3 to 4% was working remote, and that figure still remains at 30%. And this is based upon a study that was done recently by Stanford, a very reputable study. Now, think about in terms of how you can get participants to engage if they're not in the office. And think about the education experience specifically. And I want to think about how you used to always perform. You probably were doing something that was this, right? Some type of a lunch and learn that you were simply going in once a quarter, whatever sort of repetition that you give to that. And lo and behold, they're not there. Could you imagine that you actually had LinkedIn as a client? How are you going to educate those folks that are not even in there? Well, the answer lies is that there's quite a few different mediums, right? So just from a pure engagement standpoint, the education experience is going through a massive, massive evolution. Multiple topics delivered through multiple mediums, some of which are recorded, some of which are still live, some of which might be in the actual workplace, if in fact there is a physical workplace. Some of them delivered in a more virtual fashion, live, but with a recording button hit. It has just turned into a variety of different touch points in order to keep the engagements up. And that is nothing like the old school way of doing things 10 years ago. So that's just one aspect, is in terms of variety in the education, different strokes for different folks. We've also noticed that from a financial wellness standpoint, things have really taken off in terms of participants coming to the websites if they have good financial wellness tools. Probably one of the areas that we've seen the greatest lift is with some of the younger participants who historically never go to the websites, who are now pulling up topics such as a savings and debt and budgeting, life insurance needs, and things like that, topics that were never at their disposal before. And again, these are all things that are increasing engagement. And so from your own perspective, it's really kind of a tough environment that we're in right now of, can you afford to build out everything yourself, or working with a company that has these tools at your fingertips? Now, I mentioned retirement, and certainly retirement is still the absolute biggest tool that they go to. But really, truly, from the standpoint of something that is engaging, it's more than just a snapshot of what their balance is, right? So hopefully you're working with a provider that has a tool similar to what we have, which is more about income replacement, right? We call it Retire on Target. And quite simply, you have lots of different triggers that you can change. Savings rates, asset allocation, retirement dates. All these basic tools will always spit out a different number. So they have the ability to play around with quite a few different scenarios and make sure that they're on the path for having a secure retirement. Again, all these things are geared towards increasing engagement. Now, interestingly, from an engagement standpoint, one of the things that's coming up more and more are participants who are now not necessarily demanding, but are asking, I would like to have advice on my retirement plan. Now, I know that doesn't seem so novel, but where do you draw the line at educating without actually giving advice, right? And every one of you on the call needs to make that decision of whether or not you're going to step over the line and actually give advice. Well, if it's something that you don't want to do, I'll share with you that about 70% of participants are asking for it. And one of your options is to outsource it through some type of a managed money solution. And quite frankly, when it comes to managed money, there's really one basic option that one issue you're trying to solve for is to make sure that all of your participants have individualized advice given to them, but at the end of the day, that they have a glide path that does follow something resembling a prudent way of investing. Right. And really what you're trying to avoid is those asset allocations that when you look at the individuals that are just scattershot all over the place, versus trying to provide a solid line for them to increase their chances of a solid retirement. Now, that's if you wanted to outsource, but there is certainly a solution, which is you in particular. And we're actually finding more and more advisors, especially those that are part of bigger teams, are bringing on a CFP who's devoted to working with the participants. Now, maybe it's not something that you have the bandwidth to do quite yet. Maybe you're now at that inflection point of looking at. But certainly, I've been through the whole circuit the last year or two, whether it be NAPA or some of the other bigger conferences, or even your own RPAG conference. And there's more and more of an emphasis on providing that one-on-one, not necessarily just education, but advice to individuals, right? Whether you do it face to face, whether it's something that's done on the phone, just know that it's something that is being asked for more and more. And that's all, if you sum these things up, whether it be the education, the financial wellness, the managed money, the retirement income tools, all of these things are geared towards just giving you some ideas on how you can increase that engagement. So with that, let's move on to the next party, which is the CEO. Now, again, as I mentioned prior, there's certainly some overlap that, when it comes to retention, you probably have the HR that's screaming the same thing, saying, hey, we just lost a key person. So what can be done from a retention standpoint? Well, certainly the company themselves has a variety of different things they can do to have a healthy workplace, and team building and things of that nature that create some job satisfaction. But here, when we're working specifically with retirement plans and asking what does better look like, let's solve for an issue. And one of the main issues that we have right now is that talent retention is a major, major concern. Right now, if you were to go back to the last time we had a financial crisis, 2009, 2010, retention was not a big issue because a lot of layoffs were happening, right? But in this particular environment that we're in now, and obviously we've just been through this thing called the Great Resignation, I think that we're out of it, but retention is an absolute major, major concern. And you'll find that the cost of replacing that employee increases dramatically the more highly compensated they are. Now, I've seen stats like this off and on for a bunch of years of just, what is the cost to replace that employee? And if it's a rank and file, yeah, there's going to be some significant cost in terms of disruption, getting somebody new in place, training them up, and get them, producing their widgets again, or whatever the case might be. But when it comes to an executive, a top salesperson, the head of marketing, those type of positions that, God forbid, it's a CFO, right? The impact that can have on the company is extraordinary in terms of the negative impact it could have. So in this case, if it is a major concern, this talent retention, what can we do? Well, the first thing to acknowledge is that when you get to the highly compensated end of the spectrum, and here we're talking 200, 250, 300 and up, there's a massive retirement income shortfall. Right now, retirement income shortfall is measured by income replacement. And if the only solution that's in place is a 401k plan, that coupled with Social Security, there's actually a savings disadvantage for the highly compensated individual. Now nobody's playing a violin for them or feeling very sorry about it, but the point being is that there is a massive, massive gap. And one of the best ways of resolving that gap, that executive gap, is some combination of non-qualified deferred compensation and or a cash balance defined benefit plan. So one of the questions that I would ask of all of you, is that something that's part of your regular conversations with your existing customers, right? There tends to be a little bit of a fear factor of, hey, you know what, I'm not an expert in those things, so they're not necessarily things that I want to get to dabble into. But these are the very topics that outsiders, the solicitors, are picking their interest on, right? So do know that in terms of partnering with something like CUNY Mutual Group, we've got a long history of offering these solutions, as Chris mentioned at the beginning of the hour, and know that we're one of the top providers out there and can provide all that support for you. Now, it's not necessarily something that's going to be a fit for every situation, but it certainly does have three, very, very distinct issues that it can solve. And we call them the three R's: retention, reward, recruit. Right. So from a retention standpoint, that's sort of at the defensive end of things. Of, hey, I want to make sure that I have my existing executive, my existing highly compensated individuals remain loyal to us, and putting some other solution than 401k in place can increase that retention. Now, just from a peer superior performance standpoint, the second R is reward, and the third one is getting on the offense. Is it can also become a great recruiting tool, right? If you've already unfortunately lost a key employee or two, of being a way to draw top talent into the company. Is this going to be the cure-all solution for retention? No, but it is just one of the tools that are at your disposal that can be of tremendous, tremendous help. Now, we certainly don't want to get in too much of a dialogue of when cash balance makes sense or when non-qualified makes sense, non-qual. There's quite a bit of overlap between the two. But just know that there's really not a one-size-fits-all type of solution. There's certain scenarios where non-qual works best. There's other solutions where cash balance is the better. And then there's a tremendous amount of overlap in between. So what is it that you can do today if you don't have the expertise in these different types of situations? I'm going to refer to you what are called cues and clues. So what are exactly cues and clues? Well, cues, these are just things that are verbal. So all you need to do is listen. Clues, these are things you just need to look, right? So all we're suggesting is if you can, when you're meeting with your existing clients or when you are in a situation where you're working with a prospect, that perhaps there is just a way of just fine-tuning your listening skills and your looking skills specifically to try to uncover a couple of things. From a cue standpoint, there might be an expression at the top of the house that they want to save more, or that they want to try to find greater tax deductions than they're getting right now. You might hear some conversations about business succession. There might be some comments about specific individuals, specific employees that, hey man, if we ever lost so-and-so, we would be up a creek. It could be that they're requesting a safe harbor or a profit share type of proposal. They could be asking for a cash balance, but have not even looked at non-qual as an option, right? All of those things are specific cues that suggest that perhaps something beyond the 401k makes sense. Now, from a peer clue standpoint, anytime there's a 401k refund, not good. Any ADP, ACP testing failures, obviously that speaks for itself. If the contribution rates for the highly compensated is lower than the general population, there might be some issues of a top-heavy plan. And certainly if there's been any recent executive turnover, or if that executive team is expanding. And again, these are certain cues and clues. We can certainly get you a copy of some of these. But again, without becoming the expert, they are a way of really addressing that basic need that is coming from the CEO or someone else at the top of the company. We've got some real concerns about retention, right? So 2 down, 1 to go. The third is the CFO. Now, what was the CFO telling us? The CFO is sort of the money person, and they're saying, I really don't want things to be in a box anymore. I want to have some flexibility. So when we talk about flexibility, it starts with the 3 F's: fees, funds, and fiduciary, right? So from a fee standpoint, having some choices on how the fees are assessed. From a fund standpoint, being able to access a broad universe of investments. And from a fiduciary standpoint, just having some different fiduciary solutions in place. I want to share with you a really interesting look at specifically ERISA Section 404, right? This is the main section that is devoted to what are the responsibilities of a plan fiduciary. And there's 5 that are listed. Now, the first 3 really do carry some very obvious repercussions for doing them or not doing. you've got the very first responsibility says, well, act solely in the interest of plan participants. Sort of get that. Second, carry out your duties prudently. Sort of get that. Third, follow the plan document. Sort of get that. When it comes to fees and funds, it is just mind-boggling how wide open they are. For fees, fiduciary responsibility number 4 says pay only reasonable plan expenses. What does that mean? No guidance. There's absolutely no guidance when it comes to how they quote unquote define reasonable. Funds is even better. Have a diverse set of investments. Diversity. If you've never looked at the U.S. government, like the federal government, 457, there's a stock fund, there's a bond fund, there's a fixed account, and there's an index. There's a international fund. They might have added one or two more. It's diversified, but think about what we do every day of screening all the small cap growth funds out there and making sure that we're getting a top quartile fund to put in the lineup versus some others' definition of diversity, which is 6 different investment options. Yeah, they're indexed and they have a lot that are falling underneath that index. But again, they're very much open to interpretation. Now, the good news in terms of these last two is that we've commissioned a study from an outside ERISA attorney, Endeavor Retirement, and specifically a very talented individual, Bonnie Treichel, who's given us a lot of her time in terms of helping take those two a little bit further, right? And to really get this kind of conversation started in terms of fees and funds, it really does kind of beg the question, do you think the DOL is going to ease off the gas pedal anytime soon? Do you think all of a sudden they're going to say we're good? Or do you think we're going to continue to charge forward, specifically on fees and funds? Now, if you've heard what our president has said in the last couple of days, the answer is they're going to continue to charge forward. This will continue to be an ongoing thing for quite a long time, right? So how do we kind of uncover this a little bit further in terms of something that goes a little bit beyond just are the fees reasonable? Where might they look? Where are some of the things that we should have some not necessarily concern today, but if we want to skate to where the puck isn't, where it might be going tomorrow, what are some of the considerations? Now, Bonnie Treichel with Endeavor Retirement helped us put together a fiduciary decision tree that's got quite a few questions that they're yes or no, filling the blank type of material. And there's no suggestion that if you answer yes versus answer no, that it's right or wrong. There's not a right or wrong, because the way that the regs are written right now, they're just overly broad. And so it's very hard to know where it's black and white. There's just this massive, massive gray. So from some of the standpoint of some of the decision tree questions for fiduciary is, do you have some flexibility in terms of how the fees are paid, right? You certainly can be asset-based, you can be flat fee, there could be some variation on the two, which is a hybrid. Do you have all of those options available to you? Now, if you don't, if you only have one option available to you in today's world, it doesn't mean it's wrong. But do you have a process in place for your methodology for choosing that structure? Another big one that could be coming down the pike sometime soon is the transparency of the fees, right? So we began this whole process in terms of 10 plus years ago of 408B2 and 404A5 coming to fruition. Now, I don't know about you if you were in this market 10 years ago, but when the 404A5 finally came into play, and I, with my 401k plan, got the disclosures in the mail, it looked like a prospectus. It just looked like 20 pages of tissue paper, right? That really, really thin paper that a prospectus typically has with very, very small font. But if we flip over to 408B2, there continues to be scrutiny of the transparency of the fees. And one question that will come up even in this decision tree document is, are you receiving a 408B2 from all parties that are involved in the transaction of of maintaining a retirement plan, right? I think a lot of folks will expect to get that from their record keeper, but are they getting that from other parties involved as well? And unpeeling the fee transparency a little bit is, are there revenue share agreements, right? The most prevalent revenue share agreements are with the record keeper or the TPA or some combination thereof. And these are ways of just applying a little bit more of a magnifying glass to what's there right now from a fee standpoint. Now, obviously, fees and funds are attached at the hip, right? There is an interplay between these. And in some way, just to think about this, to state the obvious, that the more limitations you have on the fund selection means that there's probably a greater percentage of revenue share happening on the other end, right? They sort of work in reverse directions. Now, from a pure fund standpoint, probably the most overused term that we hear out there is open architecture, right? So when someone says the word open architecture, what does that actually mean? Well, knowing that there's 15 to 20,000 options for investments out there, OpenArch would imply that you have access to most of those, right? I think we'd all agree on that. Now, if you don't have a precious metals fund inside of your fund lineup, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not open architecture, but do you have a broad universe to choose from? If you do have a smaller number, and again, this is part of the decision tree, do you have any conflicts in terms of selection? Right? If open architecture is defined by only a choice of 500 funds, is there some revenue share that's happening based upon those 500 funds being in the fund lineup? And that brings that next layer of fee transparency down to revenue sharing, which is specifically with the investments that are in the fund lineup. And specifically, is there some type of a pro rata arrangement, or is it per capita? Now, I'm going to give a small example on this. Let's suppose that we have a CEO that has $1 million in the 401k plan, and we have average Joe that has 20,000 in it, right? There's a massive disparity in terms of their account balances. And depending on how the revenue share happens and how the fees are assessed, are they both paying their fair share, or are they both paying equal? Right now, imagine that the two of them went out to lunch and one person rang up a big bill in terms of ordering lobster, and the other one had a glass of water and a piece of toast. And imagine if they had to split the bill half and half. From just the standpoint of thinking about the fiduciary implications of that, are things in the best interest of the participant, and are they equitable across all the participants that are in the lineup? So those are just a couple of things. And again, there's no right or wrong, but it goes back to the word, is there flexibility? Now we're going to stay on topic with CFO for a second, but we want to take it a little bit different direction to really bring this thing full circle. And that is, shove everything aside for a second and ask, what is the most important thing for the individual participants and the plan as a whole? And that's plan health, right? So from a plan health standpoint, do you as an advisor have access to reports that can display the overall success of the plan health? You know, from a participation standpoint, from a deferral standpoint, investment allocation, contributions, all those things are hugely important to be able to report that we've got a good portion of our employees that are really on track. But a healthy plan is not only a macro view, but really getting down to the very specific of what does the micro view look like? And do you have access to be able to get down to the individual participant level and see how they're doing? Right? At the end of the day, this is what the end goal is, right? This is where you're going to increase your retention, is if you have good plan health. In terms of your prospecting efforts, if you can demonstrate that you have the ability to access reports that can give them the information that they want, that's where success is going to come. Well, in terms of some of the things we've covered, again, I want to kind of go back to the beginning in terms of, is this plan sponsor one decision-making unit, or is there perhaps a couple of parties that have varying degrees of need from the plan. Right. First of all, it was the HR professional saying we need to have more participant engagement. It was the CEO ultimately concerned about retention. It was the CFO that does have ongoing concerns about the flexibility in terms of fees, funds, fiduciary. Right. All of those things, when they add up, can help you in terms of your overall success. Now, related to that, I cover what's called the Retirement Consultant Institute, which is really a whole host of tools and resources that are there to help you become more successful, right? To help you become better. Now, what we covered today, to a large extent, had to do with client management and client retention, right? And if you want to get some more information, either specifically to what we covered today, including the Endeavor retirement report and the fiduciary decision-making tree, by all means, reach out to your local regional vice president. That's what they're there to do. And know that beyond just what we covered today, there's a whole bunch of other tools and resources that can help you create more wins, increase your efficiency and retention. And we certainly would look forward to having you reach out to us. Now, I want to take this back to the very, very beginning word of better, right? And I want you to think about a particular athlete who was extraordinarily successful. His name is Shaun White. Probably recognize him. He's the GOAT of snowboarding, especially specifically half pipe. That is without a doubt, right? Now, what's interesting about his journey is that back when he was a young pup, he won the gold medal back in 2006. He had wild flowing red hair. He was called the Flying Tomato, doing routines that nobody else had ever seen before. So he got the gold in 2006. Now, the next Olympics were 2010, and leading up to that, he got better. He created a new routine that was called the Mick Twist, landed in 2010, another gold. Get to 2014, he didn't qualify, had a slip up. Now, as 2018 was nearing, he knew that everybody was doing his routine from 2010. So he came up with a brand new trick, and he, in practice, just royally broke his face, royally. But he didn't quit. He did not give up. And at the 2018 Olympics in South Korea, he won his third gold medal with a routine that nobody ever saw before. So fast forward to 2022, he'd just done this routine in 2018 that was off the charts that nobody had ever seen before. By the time 2022 rolled around, he did the same routine. I mean, he nailed it just as good as it was in 18, and he didn't even medal. He got fourth place. So the point being is that we always strive to be better. When it comes to an athlete, obviously age is going to eventually catch up with them, but not for most of us, right? There is always better. And we look forward to hopefully partnering with you in the future. Hopefully it can help you deliver a better retirement plan experience. So we want to appreciate you for your time today. Please reach out to our regional vice presidents as to how we can help each other, how we can partner. And by all means, we look forward to getting better.